Hello, everybody. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm Chief Trendwatch of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement. That's a European quarterly magazine in print and online. And we also have a bi-weekly newsletter. And I'm also the architect of the SCM consultancy Subway Map Europe. I'll explain it later. But in the next 60 minutes live, we're going to talk about supply chain communication in the AI era. So basically, we're going to talk about supply chain, and we talk about communication, and also what's happening in the world, and also what's happening with AI, ChatGPT, and the like. All right, you see me on the left, that's me. And next to me, I have my colleague, Nicole Messink. She has been working for Supply Chain Media 5 years now. And before that, she has been working in recruitment, but also in the publishing business. And she has a background, academic background in behavioral science. So Nicole, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, and next to Nicole, we have Jasper van Rijn. He's a managing partner at IG&H Consulting. So that's quite a large supply chain consultancy firm in the Netherlands, but also with a footprint across Europe. We'll talk about it later briefly. He's been working at IG&H for 13 years now, and he's also been working within the supply chain at Dow Chemical for 8 years. And he has been working on a top 28 supply chain executive Europe for this year and also last year. So welcome, Jasper.
Thank you.
All right. Before we start and talk about supply chain communication, that kind of stuff. So this webinar will be recorded and will be made available on YouTube within 48 hours. So the audience is on mute. We have registrants from all over the world, 42 countries. So that's quite nice to see. You are all on mute, but you can interact with us. You see the chat functionality on the right-hand side, so you can chat. And then probably the first asking will it be recorded? Yes, this has been recorded. But if you want to interact with us and ask questions to Jasper, Nicole, or myself, please use the Q&A function. You see these small text bubbles on the right-hand side. If the questions are in line of the discussion I will be having with Jasper and Nicole, I will ask this question immediately. If not, I will reserve the question for the Q&A at the end, in the last 5 minutes of this whole hour. All right, and next to that, we have also 30 minutes afterwards. So if you want to have a conversation with the three of us afterwards, you can sit down in the virtual lounge. Let's look like this. And we will be sitting at table 1. It's quite easy to get there, and we don't bite. So if you have more questions to us, so please join us afterwards. All right. As of this point, we will put off our camera, so you can enlarge your screen. So Nicole and Jasper and I will be there, but we will not on camera. So you can enlarge your screen. So like I mentioned, I'm the architect of the SCM Consulting Subway Map. This is this year's version. So basically all the main supply chain consultancy in Europe are positioned on this map. The Big Four, the strategy consultants, etc. But also a lot of supply chain boutiques are on it. And we have also analyzed their service lines. So that's from strategy level, tactical, operational. It's about strategy, S&OP, etc. And of course, IG&H is also on there. As you can see, so on the black line, they do advisory on strategy, also on S&OP, network design, and especially on big data and predictive analytics. They are quite big. So this is how they are positioned on our subway map here. But Jasper, maybe you can tell a bit more about IG&H yourself.
Yes, for sure. And thanks for the introduction, Martijn. So yeah, so we are primarily a Dutch-based consulting and technology firm. Have been around for 35 years. About 600 people in size nowadays. I think from the start we've been involved in supply chain in the fields that you just described. So supply chain design to supply chain transformation work. We operate in 3 main sectors. That's financial services, healthcare, and what we call products and logistics here, which is the list of clients that we show on this slide. For us, that typically means 3 particular sectors that we serve, FMCG and CPG, so more the manufacturing type companies, retailers and wholesalers, where there's of course the complexity of assortments, and then the logistic service providers. Yeah, maybe it's good to mention that We are a combination of consulting and tech, so we have quite strong capabilities in the field of data and technology that we then also use to improve the supply chains of our customers. So that's more and more the type of work that we see on the horizon, and that we will be talking about today as well.
Yeah, and you have a few partnership with supply chain
Yeah.
software firms. I see in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. So for more the supply chain control, we provide. We build solution ourselves, but we also offer implementation support for the main, let's say, leading solutions out there, which is indeed O9 and Raylex, and to an extent also Slimstop for us, which we have partnership with indeed.
And you have also an office in Portugal where you have a lot of data scientists, I think.
Yeah, correct. So we have a technology hub in Portugal where we do both the development as well as the services around the technology implementation, which is about 150 people size entity, where we provide those kind of services from. Yeah.
All right. Okay, thanks. So next, we're going to talk about supply chain and communication. So it's interesting to see, what CEOs are talking about in their quarterly earning call. So this is an overview. This has been created by a German scale-up, IoT Analytics, and they have been doing that since 2020. So basically, they scrape the transcriptions of this quarterly earning calls with the 4,500 companies, and with this they visualize what the CEOs are talking about. And here you see all the buzzwords they are using during their calls. And on the right hand side is a log scale. So you see economic concerns is high on their radar, but they also talk a lot about AI. You see it on the right hand side. So that's the corner where you should be mentioned as a buzzword. But you see in yellow, you see that AI is mentioned in different shapes and forms, like Copilot, generative AI, chatbot, OpenAI, and ChatGPT more to the left. So that's been scrambled all over the page. Supply chain has been on this overview since 2020, since the beginning of COVID. Yeah, CEOs do talk about supply chain, but you see also about ecosystem shortage, reshoring, digital twin. So that's on it. Nicole, if you look at this, what is remarkable in your opinion if you look at these phrases?
What I find remarkable personally is that a CEO should have a really broad spectrum of buzzwords used to do his day-to-day business, and this is all hardcore skills that they are talking about, and I don't see any soft skills. Like, where is change management in this overview? Business transformation is not mentioned, and also if you are talking about those topics, how do you get there? So where's storytelling or internal communication in this overview? That's really remarkable to me.
Okay, thanks. We will talk about it later because I think these soft skills are very important, and communication is a more soft skill related trait, I would say. So basically, as supply chain media, we pick a topic or a theme for the year, and this year was the topic was ants. So we use ants as a metaphor for what's happening in the world, and we're still going to use it for next year. We are not lazy, but we're still, the world remains an anthill. It's chaos all over, and the chaos is getting bigger and bigger. So it seems, but the main thing is we want to make sense of the world, what's happening in the world, and how does it relate to supply chain and these kind of topics. So if we drill deeper, this is the ripple effect we have been visualized since early 2020 and has been evolved. So basically this overview is depicting the different kind of black swans that we have experienced in the last 4 years. So COVID-19, war in Ukraine, Gaza, and even for a lot of companies, CSRD seems to be a black swan because maybe you are not publicly traded company, but 55,000 companies in Europe are indirectly affected by CSRD because one of their customers or the customer of their customers or the supplier of the supplier are publicly traded. So they have to comply also to CSRD rules and have to come up with CO2 emission data. And as you can see here with COVID-19, there were lockdowns, shortages, bullwhips leading into recessions and that kind of stuff. Jasper, if you look at this, what are the main topics you are discussing with your clients?
Well, it's a couple of things that come up, Martijn. I think still, I would say we have a lot of discussions about cost and cost control, and nowadays it's maybe not as much anymore as the past years, where inflation, energy cost rising were on the top of everyone's agenda. I think it's a little less prominent, but I still see a lot of supply chain executives struggling with finding the next level of cost performance and then realizing that. So that's definitely one topic. Then you mentioned CSRD already. Also, from my end, I really see a lot of discussions here in the clients that I work with in what this means for them, and maybe not only the immediate reporting needs, but also how to more fundamentally and structurally get data of a quality that it can be used for CSRD and other purposes. So I see a lot of focus on taking a next step in building your data platforms to allow for CSRD reporting, but also for AI and GenAI purposes. So I think that's a big agenda. Mm-hmm. And then in some sectors, you mentioned bullwhip. I think we still see some lingering or rippling effect of what happened in COVID and post-COVID in terms of the inventory buildups and the time it takes to mitigate and deplete those inventories, really. But also, looking end to end at supply chains to prevent any next event from having that impact again. So I think that's also a topic that I see on many agendas. To name a few,
yeah, to name a few, there are way more. So when I have interviews and conversations with supply chain directors and CEOs, supply chain officers, this kind of visualization really resonates, because they think, this is reflecting what's happening in the world, and they digest it, and they think, this is also useful for themselves internally and to have conversations. So this is also a useful way to get a better conversation with your board members or other colleagues. So that's one thing. So we also have translated it in the visualization of ecosystems. So basically, the linear supply chain is not useful anymore. It's more complicated. So basically, this is how we should visualize ecosystems. This is an example for the ecosystem of household product, the world of Procter & Gamble and Coty and the like. So it's more diverse kind of companies in there. So that's one thing, and it's also becoming more circular with recycling, bio-based raw materials, etc. And you have also third parties in a gray area, other kind of entities in your field, in your ecosystem. And when I show this, a lot of companies think, okay, this is great. This is also what we should have internally. Talking about communication, I think we used to map out supply chain in a linear sense. Nicole, what do you think? How we could use, or how companies should use this?
It's a very useful visualization in different ways. Also, next to the ripple effects that you just showed, this ecosystem helps to get you a better understanding what entities are influenced by those effects. So, for example, the war in Ukraine, what entities does it influence? How does that influence your company? And what kind of conversations do you have with that stakeholders and within your company about that stakeholders? So it helps you have a better conversation.
Good to know. I think that we will develop more and more of this kind of visualization of ecosystems. We have also developed one about the agricultural food ecosystem, and that's also changing. And it helps to identify which party are involved, which stakeholders are out there, and what are the main forces. So, like I said, you have the stakeholders, but also the different kind of flows. Flow of goods, flow of information, flow of money, and also possibly the flow of personnel, of people, where they flow in and flow out. So that kind of stuff. Next, Jasper was also mentioning before that there are a lot of transformations going on. And we also did a survey with another supply chain consulting firm, FSO, among 81 supply chain executives in Europe. We asked these executives what kind of transformations are you going through, and what are the decisive drivers? And the majority of the executives are responding that the business strategy is the most important driver of this transformation. Jasper, the slogan of your company is "Make strategy work." What does this say? This kind of a result of a survey.
Well, it's a good question. Maybe a couple of things. So I fully agree. Yes. So the business strategy is almost always a driver for supply chain transformation. So sometimes we see the opposite, that we start with a supply chain project, but it's not properly linked to business strategy, and then it becomes a difficult project to execute, as you can imagine. I think one of the key challenges here on business strategy, Martijn, is that we often find that business strategy results into an enormous amount of priorities, right? And often achieved in a very short period of time as an ambition. And I think one of the key discussions we also often have with our clients is that, how do you really choose between competing priorities, and also really forcing them to choose, right? Because it's often an illusion that you can realize all these priorities at the same time. So I think making choices is really making distinct choices is what sets winners apart from others. Yeah.
And I think that Napoleon once said, strategy is creating a portfolio of options.
Yeah.
Some companies don't have a portfolio of options. They don't have any options. So there's nothing to choose as a strategy. That's one thing. Down below, you see also internal factors, internal drivers, your own financial results, etc. But also external drivers, political pressures, and so it's also depending what are your forces. And I think in your world of your clients, Jasper, is it in retail FMCG, you see FMCG, they have more and more the appetite to go directly to consumer. So that's also what you see in your market, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true, and it of course differs greatly per type of FMCG player. For one, it's more obvious as a business model than in others. But we clearly see a tendency that companies are experimenting at least with a direct to consumer channel, not only for getting access to new business streams or maybe more margin, right? Because you cut out the middleman, if you will, but also to get more and better insights directly from consumers and translate that into, let's say, new or better product requirements. So it's definitely something that's still ongoing, but it's not something that's easily done. So we see FMCG players then almost becoming retailers and learning that being a retailer is of course a business on its own with distinct skills that you need to have. So yeah.
Getting back about the topic of this webinar about communication, I can imagine that if you are an FMCG company and you want to go direct to consumer, that requires different kind of behavior internally, to respond to consumers, etc., to social media. So that I think that also has, obligations internally, to change the way of working.
Yeah.
All right, and let's go beyond that. Another question we asked to the audience, about the main goals to transform your supply chain, and one of the major ones was increased resilience and agility. So how to become more flexible and agile, and that sounds interesting and logical. But I think the consequences, how do you do that? What does it mean? And I think that you also. It's not something you shout about within your company and say, okay, let's be more agile, and that's it. So that's the one observation. And a third line is adapt for new business service and models. We just touched upon this. Jasper, if you look at this, what kind of project do you see relating to this? So of this kind of transformation of supply chain?
Yeah, a couple of things. So again, here is cost reduction. You don't highlight it here, but it's still number 2 on this list.
Yep.
And I mentioned it before. So I think that's always an agenda, right? So business is almost by nature always becoming more complex, right? Being new services, more products, more channels, the proliferation, it's always getting more complex. So I would say there's an everlasting agenda on managing costs and so reducing costs. So we still see that ongoing on the agenda. And then I think on resilience and agility, for me comes to mind, Martijn, is that we see in supply chain, in the logistics side, for instance, still quite some programs, projects to further automate, mechanize your supply chain, to provide more, on the one hand, a better cost proposition, but also to allow for more operational flexibility and also as an answer to labor scarcity. So I think there's quite quite a number of initiatives around that topic that we see. And what I maybe also would highlight here is the fourth or fifth one on your list, embed and adopt AI. So I think in the past years we've seen quite some initiatives here and there to explore and trial with some first proof of concepts in AI and in deploying AI in supply chain intelligence, right, to improve supply chain intelligence. And I think we see more and more momentum creating that, and more projects starting to really scale it up. I think that's the theme there for the coming years. Yeah.
And to highlight this particular topic, so you have been doing a lot of robotic process automation project in the recent past, and I think that's freeing up the time and energy from the workforce, and maybe you don't have enough people out there, but if you free up your people with repetitive tasks you can do with robotic process automation, you have more time to do more strategic things. So that's also what you have been done in the last few years, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. So not only in more the operational domains, but also in the let's say supply chain control areas, and in the more supply chain process areas. So yeah, what we see there is, especially with GenAI, also that many and with technology you can further automate some of these highly administrative tasks, and you can put it into work processes that almost do the work for you. And I think so this is maybe the less sexy side of deploying AI, Gen AI in your business, but I think there's tremendous opportunity, especially in those domains, to further improve or boost productivity by smartly streamlining those and automating those activities. We've been doing it, for instance, for a fashion company, where in their purchasing process there's a lot of data administration and follow-up needed, right? And you can imagine it goes from desk to desk to desk, with all sorts of approvals and corrections being made. Now, with some help of Gen AI and a smart workflow process, you can pre-populate and pre-fill some of these data fields automatically, and just look at the exceptions only. So I think these are some of the examples, Martijn, where I think there's a lot of opportunity untapped yet.
Yeah. If you look, go back to the ecosystem. If you look at it, it's very important. We have seen with COVID a lot of disruptions. So basically, if you have this kind of visualization of your ecosystem, it would be good and probably necessary. Where do you expect disruptions? Where do you see bottlenecks? Like Jasper mentioned, where do you see internal bottlenecks or repetitive tasks, etc.? That's on one side. On the positive side, where do you see synergies? Where can you work together? And that's also of interest. And you see also, the thunderbolt lightning at social media. What's happening? What could happen on social media? So that is also an interesting thing to watch. Nicole, if you look at this, what is your take if you look at this next step of visualizing your ecosystem?
From the point of communication, I think it's important to look at the gray entities like social media that you mentioned, because those are the entities that you don't, you cannot influence them yourself. They're out of your span of control, but they definitely influence your business. So decide whether that influence is bad or good, and make it part of your strategy, because they do influence your company. So you should have a strategy in your communications plan, your market plan, or maybe even your business strategy, how to handle those influences.
Good point. I know with Unilever, they are in close contact. Even maybe the last year is a bit less than 10 years ago when Paul Polman was CEO. They had a lot of direct contact with NGOs like the Greenpeace of this world. So yeah, that's quite true. And it can have, and it will have, a major impact. And even with the age of social media, with TikTok and Instagram, it's getting more and more important. So, like I mentioned before, IG&H helped us out with a project we are doing twice a year. So basically, we have 2 rankings, one for the Netherlands, and that's in the first half of the year. And the second one is about the top 28 supply chain executives Europe. So that's the second one, and we just wrapped it up. So basically, and why are we doing this? So of course, you can rank companies like Gartner is doing, the top 25 supply chain companies in the world. So, but basically, we are doing this on a personal level. We are focusing on the supply chain executives, the leaders, and then we are creating a ranking. And I have been doing that for 10 years now. So basically, this is the methodology of this top 28 supply chain ranking for Europe. And it's, there are 4 quadrants. The first one is about the financial part, the company success. The second one is about the personal responsibility. And we have been collaborating with Inspired Search, an executive recruitment agency. So that's the second part. The third quarter is about personal visibility. And the fourth one is the peer voting. So that's the personal touch of all the people we have analyzed. So this is what we are doing. And we get to communication, and we get to AI about this, but that's a remarkable part of it. In short, what we have been doing together with IG&H is, we created a long list, and also with Inspired Search, we created a long list of supply chain executives for Europe. So there are some criteria. They're all in here. You can read it faster than I can go through that. So then we come to the short list. And then we do the analysis, and then in the end we come up with a top 28, and we come to winner and number 1. So that's basically how it's set up. Jasper, maybe some insights of the input of what you're seeing in this year.
Yeah, so like you said, so we have about a database of 250 people that we maintain ongoing across all the sectors that are relevant. So this is data from 23 compared to 22. So we see quite some positive business results overall, 6% EBIT growth. So it's been a fairly profitable year for the many. And also strong business growth. So underlying trend was quite positive. Again, this is 23 compared to 22, with still some strong inflation. So that's basically the field or the conditions within supply chains or in companies had to perform. So it sort of paints the picture, the background picture of this election. So we collect quite some data points nowadays, 2,500. I think it's even more right now, to make sure we have a proper financial data set to support the election. And last but not least, we do a evaluation. We'll talk about that in more detail, of how visible supply chain leaders are. And for this list, it's a bit of a moderate result, I would say. We look for more than just LinkedIn posts, but they together published 171 relevant supply chain posts. So I would say, Martijn, the supply chain leader today is not yet very, very active on LinkedIn in telling their story, right?
Yeah.
So we'll monitor that going forward to see how that grows over time, if it grows over time.
So let's dig deeper in the first quadrant, and that so you have some interesting insights. So basically, what we are analyzing together with you is revenue growth, EBIT growth, and return on capital employed, ROCE, in a number of years. So it's not just 1 or 2 years; it's a number of years. So that's quite of interest to see. And maybe you can tell us, this is about the Dutch ranking, the top 26 of the supply chain directives we have been published in June. Maybe you can some highlight some results based on these 4 industries.
Sure. So like you said, so we use the financial performance to as one of the metrics for the leadership ranking. But more than just that, we also use the data to, of course, tell us what's going on, and for that in the market, and for that we compare the performance of companies, right? So the EBITDA performance or the EBIT margin performance against inventory turns. So we call it orbit charts over time to see how inventory helps, right? That's the underlying logic, improve your overall profitability. And we see different behavior, of course, in each of the subsectors. And again, it's a nice additional outcome of the ranking that we have here. So if you look at per subsector, maybe just briefly, right? So we just a few to highlight. So I think FMCG is quite interesting. If you look at what's happening there, is that in past 5 years, you see a steady decline of inventory performance over time. So from 2019 to 2023, you see that the inventory turns are coming down by about 10% and 15%, which sort of tells us that despite keeping their profitability up, they do need more inventories to do that. And it almost looks like that a post-COVID effect of having more inventory on the ground, more locally, is the result in this supply chain that we're seeing.
And maybe to highlight this, we had a roundtable discussion 2 weeks ago. So what we see in FMCG, there's way more volatility than pre-COVID, and because of this, increasing volatility and still going on, they need more inventory, and basically the forecasting accuracy has been going down, and because of the need for more inventory is reflected in this graph.
Yeah, and I think Martijn was also worth mentioning. We had some FMCG representatives in that during that dinner, and they also indicated that the ability to manage profitability even with lower or different business volumes is much greater because of marketing spend, for instance, which allows them to manage profitability across cycles, if you will, across economic cycles. And that's different in manufacturing and in retail, for instance, which I think is quite striking. If you look at those, maybe if I make the bridge to those 2 sectors, if you look at retail and wholesale, for instance, we see to be expected also a very strong link between inventory and margin. So better business is more turns and vice versa. So it links closely. And then you also see that retail in 23, has been able to improve inventory turns in line with better business volumes, or driven by better business volumes, I should say, compared to 2022. Though operating at a way different EBIT margin level than FMCG is typically. Maybe I don't know how much time we have more time, but maybe it's worth mentioning that pharma has a different behavior. We see 23 declining inventory performance versus 22. But also I think more generically, you see that the margin and inventory seems to be quite disconnected and also quite steady at the 1.7 range here, which also tells us what the role of inventory management is, I think, in pharma, and how it, to what extent it only contributes to the success of that business, right?
Yeah. So basically, what we also have been doing as part of this analysis for the top 28 supply chain executives of Europe, we have created orbit chart for each individual company or each individual person. So we have an orbit chart for Procter & Gamble versus Mondelez, etc. So we get also a better understanding how they perform against each other, and that also reflects, have they been merging some kind of companies or spinning off certain companies, like Philips is doing with Versuni and Signify, and that's also being reflected in this orbit chart. So basically, this way of representing financial performance in a supply chain context is very useful. And by the way, you see inventory turns. So we don't use inventory turns as a part of our ranking because they are totally different. You cannot compare them. So instead of that, we are using return on capital employed. All right. Going further, another quadrant is the personal visibility. So how visible are these supply chain leaders with press releases, interviews, keynote presentations, guest lecturers, and also on LinkedIn. Later on, I will talk about Nicole about personal branding on LinkedIn. But before we go there, IG&H has done some miracle works, I would say, to make this qualitative aspect more tangible and quantitative. Maybe you can explain, Jasper, what you have been doing.
I can explain to an extent, I would say, and thanks for the introduction. What we wanted to do when we started our collaboration, Martijn, on these two projects, as you call them, is to make the assessment on visibility a bit more quantitative. And so we've asked our data analytics team to come up with a way to measure how visible supply chain leaders are. And basically what we've done is honestly quite simple. We are downloading, scraping LinkedIn and Google for the candidates on the list, and download their what they've been posting on LinkedIn and what they have been sharing and has been extractable via Google online. And we basically put that in a database and use GenAI to interpret the quality of those posts, right? And we test it for what's being talked about, I should say, and qualify then these posts accordingly. And that's of course with at the end still an assessment by ourselves, gives us a starting ranking of how visible supply chain leaders are. And that is the starting point for what we call then the Google and the LinkedIn visibility score. That goes into the ranking. And that's basically an automated engine that just runs and analyzes basically all the communication online.
Yeah. And for example, you see a lot of supply chain leaders posting, if they are posting on LinkedIn, and we'll discuss it later, that they have been visiting a factory, they have opened up a factory. I know Karsten Rasmussen, he's the COO of Lego. He was #1, I think, a few years ago in his top 28 supply chain executive Europe. And basically, if he's visiting a factory and talk about it, that will be positively marked as a good posting, and that will be picked up via your engine.
Exactly.
If it's celebrate, a colleague has been working for 10 years. If it's not so relevant, or if it's in supply chain, they get a few points, but if it's not relevant, they don't get any point of this kind of ranking. And also,
so we're looking for Martijn's press releases, interviews, lectures, keynotes. These things are suggesting that actually thought leadership is being given. So it has to be meaningful in order to qualify. And then maybe on the LinkedIn we actually rank not only by what is being said, but we also take in how many followers, how many likes, how many reposts. These kind of metrics are also being pulled in and assessed, right, to qualify and determine the LinkedIn visibility score.
All right. In this webinar we have done this last year, and we've been going through the ranks from number 28 to #1. So yes, but I think we will talk about communication, about AI, and there's more to talk about than just mentioning the top 28. You can find the top 28, the actual ranking of this year, has been published last Friday. So we'll at the end of this webinar you'll find the link. And maybe you have already seen my post. Maybe you've seen it also on our LinkedIn. We have communicate about this. So the #1 of this year is Magnus Zetnes. He's the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Heineken. So he's been the #1 since last week for the ranking for 2024. Basically, on all the 4 quadrants, he scored in the top 5. And also in the final part of the Q4 of the peer voting is also based on personal interviews, and that's more a soft skill part of this, and based on that he has becoming the #1. On the financial part, Heineken was in the #1, also in the Q2 was in the top 3. and then top 4 in the third quadrant about visibility, he was also highly visible. So he was doing a good job about being visible, doing right communication, etc. And also in the soft skills part eventually. So he is the number 1 for this year, and I will talk about some more about it a bit later. But let's go on the communication. Then we got to interesting part, because we are in an AI area, and then we see what does it mean. Jasper, when you look at this, we asked the 81 supply chain executives in Europe about what's holding them back during supply chain and business transformation. And number 1 is a business strategy. So what's your take if you look at this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think I recognize all these factors, if you will. And I think it's so important when you start a big transformation program that you make sure that all these different factors have been properly addressed, right? To make sure that you have the all the preconditions set. But I guess, and I was looking at this list, I guess for me it ultimately comes down to you need to have all these checks and balances in place so people can feel accountable and can take accountability for a transformation. And I think all the rest almost serves that purpose, right? So for me, that's the thing that I would highlight the most, is that you do all of the above to make sure that is in place. Because if you can make that work, I see most of the projects then become successful. If not, then you have a tough ride ahead of you. So for me, that's I guess is what comes to mind.
Nicole, if you look at this, what is your observation looking at this overview?
I start sounding like a broken record, but what I see is not clear. It's not clear. The strategy is not clear. The plans are not clear. It's all about communication. So when you have a strategy, whatever it is, just make sure that everybody else in your organization and even outside knows what it is. So communicate about it and do it in a way that people understand it and like it, so that they take action upon it.
Yeah, good point. If you look at to the left, this is how NATO forces are doing briefing. It's not they standing for a screen and tell what is the business strategy or the military strategy. No, they are standing around the table and discuss the battlefield or the ecosystem. And that's what here's the former general Martijn Lofvers explaining. He's done that a few years ago. This is how you should do it. So basically, you should stand around the table so everybody is on the same page or on the map, and they can contribute to that. So getting back more to communication area. So if we look what's trending, and of course we are a media company, and earlier this year we have implemented Google Looker. So we have 30 channels, that's LinkedIn, email newsletters, website, etc. SurveyMonkey and other channels. So this we have combined. So basically this graph is showing what is the most wanted information in our audience. And by the way, we have a global outreach. And I think the supply chain movement has a group of 50,000 readers all over the world. So basically, this is quite representative of what's needed as a supply chain information. Nicole, if you look at this, what is your take if you look at this kind of overview?
Well, it's an important note that the topics that you have just shown are mostly mentioned by CEOs and supply chain executives. And with this channel that is indeed supply chain movement, we see the combined read content of almost 90,000 supply chain professionals. So this is what the mass of the supply chain professionals are reading. And you still see that AI and S&OP are hot topics. So those are aligned with the CEOs and the supply chain executives. But for example, the first one, the mind map AI and supply chains, maybe also point out that the mass is still wondering how to start with AI. It is a hot topic. We need to do something with it, but we don't have an action plan on it. So it differs a little bit from what you might expect looking at what the CEOs and the supply chain executives are talking about.
But the good thing for us is, we're still working with this dashboard, how to use it. On a meta level, we can see what's trending, and you see all kind of graphs. So that's kind of interesting. And I know I've been talking to a lot of supply chain executives within corporate companies, multinationals. They have, for internal purposes, they use Yammer to do internal communications. But also I see that sometimes this kind of platforms is not being used quite well, or as it should be. So basically, this is an overview to know what's trending. This is the supply chain community globally, but I think there's also a high need within companies to see what's trending. What are your supply chain colleagues are reading? What are you missing out? And what do they want to know? What don't they know? What should they know, etc. And that's also what we see for the future is that there's a huge gap on knowledge management internally, and also what kind of knowledge is out there. And so we are also doing some pilots with a new tool called SCM Wisdom, that we are creating a knowledge base with machine learning and personal profiles. And on top of that, we can see who's reading what and what's missing out, and etc. What's trending. Getting deeper on the supply chain content part, since the last 2 years, ChatGPT has been around, and some people are very enthusiastic about it. But also, it's creating hallucinations. Is ChatGPT giving you the truth, the right overview? So, Nicole, you have been doing some prompting on supply chain content. Maybe you can talk about it a bit.
Yeah, I find it interesting to see how accurate ChatGPT or other AI tools can answer specific questions or can point out correlations between different things that are going on in the world. And what I did in this case is that I asked a very broad question to ChatGPT, and that was, can you give me the 5 key trends that are currently trending in the European supply chain? And give me the sources of it as well, to see if we can fact check anything that the output gives us. And this was the list that ChatGPT came up with. And you definitely see some overlap, but I'm also interested in Martijn, you as a supply chain expert, and Jasper is the one who is talking with different companies from a day-to-day basis. Do you recognize these subjects? Are these indeed the topics that companies struggle with, or that they at least talk about?
Well, I like to start first, and then I will move over to Jasper. When I look at this overview, I think, yes, to some extent, these are the topics that these are the trends that are relevant. But when I look at it, it's a bit too generic, not specific enough. Look at sustainability. I think, the people who I'm be talking to, supply chain executives, are talking about scope 3, and they talk about CSRD specifically, or CBAM. So that's in that field. And digitalization and AI integration, yes, but I think we talk about GenAI, we talk about GenAI and forecasting. So looking at these topics, I think in real life, I having conversations more specific on certain topics. That's my take on this. Jasper, what is your take when you look at this?
So I fully agree with you, and I think everything we do, you could somehow fit into one of these 5 categories, right? So it's always right, but it's exactly like you say. It's very generic the way it's described here, and I think the devil is much more in the level below, right? So if you talk, for instance, about data-centric decision making, I think any CEO or any COO will say, yes, I want that, right? But what does that mean, and how and where are you going to start first, right? Because it often means that somehow you need to, sort out your data, get maybe with AI or GenAI a prediction or a projection or a forecast, right, in place, and then that forecast need to go into and feed into another system where it, can lead to a replenishment order, for instance. I think it's more on that level where the challenges are, not so much on this generic level. And that's where quite quickly the discussion will go towards.
Yeah.
But of course, in the generic themes, this is absolutely, what's on the agenda, right? So
yeah. And I know that ChatGPT will also give you some bullet points below, etc. But what we are seeing, companies are in need of business cases. What is Nestle doing? What is Unilever doing, etc. And so basically, we publish about this. We do a lot of interviews, etc. So with our SCM Wisdom, we have a lot of cases, etc., and transcripts of interviews, etc.
Martijn, what I am seeing, maybe just one more reflection on that list is, if you go one slide up, is that because of sustainability and regulation reporting requirements, because of the ambition to work and turn the promise of AI or GenAI into value, I do see a stronger agenda on backbone technology and data platforms. So I think that companies are more and more picking up that challenge and tackling that bigger challenge challenge to make your data and technology infrastructure at a higher level so that you can deploy AI effectively, or you have your reports in place for sustainability reporting, for instance. So that is, I think, also an underlying trend that I'm seeing.
And maybe reflecting on this list, I think that, I was talking to a CCO early this morning, and there's a lot of stuff on his plate, and it's also about prioritization. Where do I start? What do I pick up? What do I ignore? And etc. So that's also a thing maybe we should ask. Maybe Nicole should ask it as a prompt. What should be the prioritization of this list? Because is it on this number on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or how should you prioritize these trends shaping your supply chain?
Yeah.
Another thing is what we also see now. A picture says more than 1,000 words. We all know that. So and maybe you can tell what you have been doing, Nicole.
Yeah, I was interested to see how different AI tools will create visuals, because that's one thing that we see is heavily consumed by our readers, the visualizations that we create on different topics and the different kinds of visualizations. And one of those visualizations that we published just recently was a company as a human body. And there's a lot of details in that one picture that will give you some opening for discussion. And so I gave a very detailed prompt to ChatGPT to help him along the way and create a visual from a human body with the metaphor that it should be a company. And personally, once the output is given to me, I'm always positively surprised. It looks cool, it looks fancy, it's colored, it grabs my attention. But then if you look into more detail, besides that in visualizations the wording is incorrect, there's a lot of things that raise my eyebrows, like why does the human body here has 6 arms? What are the different organs within that body? It's just wrong. It's not automatically correct. So although it looks fancy to start off with, there's a lot wrong with it, I would say, when you look more closely. And of course, and I put those side notes in the sheets, bullshit in is bullshit out. So it should be partly my fault with the prompt that I gave it. But even if the visuals were more accurate, you can wonder if these visuals are unique. And if you would use these visuals at a company, are they aligned with your company brand or any communication guidelines? And also, more and more people will start creating visuals with AI tools, and they all sort of look alike. So maybe it tires people out really fast. And I think that we should never forget the human touch and the intelligence humans can bring to AI. So it's a good start, but it needs a lot of work from what AI created to get a final visualization that is correct.
So when I created this visualization of the company as a human body on the right-hand side, I asked ChatGPT, could you do the analogy? And ChatGPT answered, that's an interesting challenge. I'm gonna try. And ChatGPT failed miserably. So basically, then I have to do all the work. And then we created this visualization with an art director on the right-hand side and wrote an article about it. And then Nicole did this challenge to ChatGPT recently. But now we are almost at the end of the webinar. Maybe Nicole, you have highlighted your LinkedIn posting. Maybe you can mention something about this.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a trend that we see a lot on LinkedIn, and I picked LinkedIn because I think it's one of the biggest B2B channels on social media today. and personal branding is going on there a lot. And it was something that marketeers or self-employed people started with. But just this week, the Dutch Financial Times published an article that over the last years, top managers of large companies start posting a lot more on LinkedIn. They saw a growth of 23%. So Jasper, you were hoping for a growth. I think Dutch Financial Times just predicted it, and the growth will be there. And I think the main reason why is that business to business is getting more and more human to human. So there is a sort of a trend backwards on the AI era that we are looking for humans. We are looking for reliability. We are looking for personal stories, and trust is a valuable currency nowadays. If you do more with your personal branding and make it about the things that you stand for, the values that you believe in, people are interested in you. Then if they are looking for a business solution, you're a go-to person that comes to mind. And it was an experiment that I tried myself. So it were a lot of personal posts that I did about good things, of course, business-wise that I achieved, but also some bad things that influences my work. And these were the results. So this is just my personal statistics. And you see a gap in the views that I have. That was during my maternity leave. So that's easily explained. But even me, and I'm not an influencer on social media whatsoever, I generated over 200,000 views over the last year with my personal profile. So maybe that gives me the position as being a marketing expert that I am now.
Quite interesting to see, and quite honest, I see also a spike in last November, and that that is also some people who know what's happening. So that's interesting to see. Okay, what does impact the number of impressions? And we almost at the end of the webinar. One thing, so last Friday, I posted well the news that Magnus Setnes, CSO of Heineken, is now the #1 in the top 28 of Supply Chain Executive Europe. And here you see the results of just 4 days. So this posting has generated over 70,000 impressions on LinkedIn. You see it by personal posting in different kind of groups, so that's adding up. So that's now you see that there's a huge snowball effect, and of course Heineken has a lot of colleagues. They are reposting it. They are congratulating Magnus Setnes, and even the CEO Dolf van der Brink of Heineken has congratulated Magnus on this #1 position on LinkedIn. So that's also of interest to see who is doing what. So basically, the message with this slide, it has a huge effect on LinkedIn, and I know it shouldn't be only about congratulations and festivities, but you see there is a huge effect, and basically there's a whole methodology behind this top 28 ranking. Jasper has explained. So this is not a fluffy stuff. No, this we have been doing a lot of analysis, and I think he has deserved this congratulations of being the #1 in the top 28. Basically, this is saying how big social media is. Well, to wrap it up, so basically we also ask, what do you see as tooling, AI? There's also mentioning in the audience, okay, we have to be very specific of AI. I know AI is a broad phrase. There's machine learning in it, and GenAI is just a subsector of it all. And as you see, where can you apply AI? What are the implications for all the people, all your colleagues? That should be explained. That's also about communication. So what we see here, AI in supply chain planning is huge, to be expected. Also machine learning and forecasting, you can read it yourself. So basically there will be a lot of AI happening in the next year. To wrap it up, yes, that means a lot of upskilling and reskilling, and that also means a lot of communication among your colleagues. Is AI a good or a bad thing? I think it will be a good thing, but you should explain it. It doesn't take away your jobs. It doesn't add new jobs or new activities to your job. Hopefully, we have done it correctly. It takes away the repetitive jobs and will create more space and time for you to do more valuable or value activities. So that's one thing. another thing that resonates, what are the topics you're going to publish about next year? So we have 4 upcoming theme issues in our print magazine of supply chain movement. The first one is about innovation and soft skills. We talk about storytelling, we talk about change management and the like. In June, we talk about AI in supply chain planning, and also GenAI as a subsector of it. We talk about scope 3 and digitalization. So how do you measure carbon emission, that kind of stuff? And we end up with supply chain visibility and resilience. So how do you visualize your ecosystem as such? I see some questions and chats, and you know, you have chat, used the chat functionality more than the Q&A functionality, and that's fine. I think, you know, we're actually out of time, and I would like to wrap it up at 5 so people can see what we have been doing. So if you want to join us in a virtual lounge, you know, come join us and sit down at table 1 right after this. Like I said, you know, we have published the top 28 recently, so you can download this special with the whole methodology, all the profiles, and the rest of the top 28 on the left-hand side. You can download the visualization of the article about the company as a human body. And last but not least, IG&H has published an interesting playbook for digital transformation that's very practical. With this, I'd like to thank the audience for watching this, and hope to see you in the lounge if you want to have more conversation with us. And Nicole, thank you for explaining what you've been doing.
Thank you for giving me the chance to talk about it.
And Jasper, you know, thank you for not only joining in this webinar, but also thank you for all the hard work for the top 28 to create this overview. Thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right. Like I said, you know, we will be in the virtual lounge right after this, within 30 seconds. With this, I would like to thank the whole audience and all the people who have been listening in the last year for this Webinar Wednesday series. So we will be joining you, and we will be starting a new series of Webinar Wednesday in January. We start off and kick off about talking about startups in the supply chain. There's a lot of things going on in Europe and the startups and scale-ups. So join me over there. And if not, I hope to see you in real life in some event, and maybe the next time. Or I will see you right after this in the lounge. Thank you for now, and bye-bye.